This is the one I got on a live snapper.
It's a little lighter now.
Yeah. Well, he's lighter and I'm heavier, so I ate him. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Captain Charles Nappy, and I'm a fisherman just like all you people are. No more, no less. I just got lucky, and I was fishing when there was a lot of fish around. Tonight, I'm going to try and teach some of you, or hopefully all of you, some techniques in catching big, giant fluke.
You know, this year it just seems like there's an awful lot of really big fluke being caught. You know, if you type in giant fluke 2021 into Google, you know, you'll see some just really impressive fish. There's lots of reports this year coming out of Montauk, Block Island, Nantucket Shoals of guys catching 13, 14, 15-pound fluke, even some that are almost close to 16. And it started to kind of make me wonder, you know, when I've talked about it with my buddies, I said, you know, is it possible that this year or next we could see a new world record? The world record was caught in 1975 by Captain Charles Nappy. It was 22 pounds, 4 ounces. And that's a big fluke. And there's been reports of some even bigger ones that didn't make the IGFA world record list. There was a supposedly 24-pounder that was caught on rod and reel, but the rod touched the gunnel during the fight, so it didn't count. But, you know, it really made me start thinking about, you know, we love bucktails and gulp, and you know, that's what a lot of people use, and with great success. But can the world record be broken, you know, by maybe changing techniques a little bit? I thought it would be really cool to pay homage to the world record fluke holder, Captain Charles Nappy. And this is a video that he had put together quite a long time ago, and I just felt that it didn't get the recognition that it deserved. So here he is. You know, there's not a lot of information about him. He passed away. But, you know, let's listen. Listen to what he has to say. The guy has a lot of experience. I thought maybe some people could gain something from this video. And, you know, hey, he is the current world record holder. And maybe somebody watching this video will set the new world record. I think it's coming. I really do. So, as always, if you like this content, please like, comment, and subscribe. Leave some comments down below, too. This is good stuff.
I knew the fluke were there, just like I said before. The draggers in the spring catch 20-pound fish. They load up on them on the south side of Montauk. Now, I know they're feeding in the fall, so I go fishing there all the time. I had a 14-pounder. Biggest one I ever got on regular baits. And I was sea bass fishing commercially for the market. They were worth a lot of money, so we didn't have a charter, so we went out fishing for the market. And we were catching snappers about that big on the sea bass hooks. At the same time, the fluke were migrating. So after 20 years of trying to figure out what to give them, that's all it took. I held it in my hand and said, that's it. And that is it. Okay, now we're at the cutting board. Everything I've taught you in this seminar and in the baiting instructions on my card will be no use to you unless you bait my rigs right. There's been 7 world records caught on these rigs so far, and yet I've met some people that can't catch a fish with them. So this is one of the most important parts of this tape. First, we have a starter bait. We have to have a starter bait to catch a fluke that we could use for doormat bait. Usually you catch fluke around average size with a starter bait. And the starter bait, we take a squid, put the knife in under the collar, slit it right down to the end, and just open it up like this. We take the insides and a mantle out. Mantle is just a piece of plastic. The bait will have not the right flutter in the water with that in there. Now we clean the backside of the squid. Take the skin off. Get a nice white piece of bait then. And that's what we have after we clean it and cut it down the collar. Now you can see the squid is already tapered to a point where the tail was. So what we do is just make straight slits like this. You can make quite a few pieces of nice bait with one squid. Now, we should slit the tail a little bit. Gives the bait a lot more undulation in the water, and it's much more attractive to the fish. Okay, now we have 3 nice pieces that we cut off that, and still half of it left. Now, we take the single wide gap hook. It's much better for lighter baits and in bays where the current is not very strong. We put the hook right in the eye of, this is a spearing, a nice spearing. We use smelts, which is a very good bait, or killies, or sand eels. You hook them all the same. Now we put the squid with the split tail, hook the widest end as close to the top as you could get it, and that's our starter bait. This is very important. We need a starter bait to catch the fluke, like I said, because fluke belly is one of the best doormat baits there are. Now, when we catch the fluke with the starter bait, we fillet it in quarters. Go right down a lateral line with your knife. Like that. Now we have to make quarters out of this. So we have a nice piece of fillet for bait. Now you still have 3 more sides on this fish. I'm using a dark side, and don't let that fool you. A lot of people like the fish with the white side, and it catches a lot of fish. But the dark side always seems to catch bigger fish, for me and for some other people too. Now we're going to take this bait and split it down the middle. Now we have 2 nice pieces of bait out of that 1/4. Now we take the tandem rig. The wide gap rig or the single hook rig would be no good for this bait because your hook would be way up here and there'd be too much bait trailing in the back. So what we do is take this strip that we just made and put the top hook, same principle as the wide gap, through the widest end as close to the top as you could get it. Now the thing is with this bait, you have to lay the hook alongside it, the bottom or stinger hook, a lot of people call it. We have to lay it alongside it so it won't be too taut. You can see just where you have to put that hook so you can figure for the bend in it. Now, that's a beautiful piece of bait, but to make it even nicer, we can split the tail on this. Now that's how that would be in the water. It's very nice, very natural, and the big fluke love it. Now you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and there'll be 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces of bait out of that one started fluke that you caught. Now I'm going to show you the bait this rig was originally designed for. That is to make it look like a school of fish in the water. Everybody that fishes for fluke usually uses the same as my starter bait here, either with a killie or one fish. And big fluke are very used to seeing it, and they're probably very smart to it by now. So this is why this rig was designed this way, to make a school of fish. You have one spearing on a top hook, one spearing on a bottom hook. Now we put another spearing on each hook, the same way through the eye socket. And another spearing on a top hook. Now you'll see the effect this will give you in the water. It'll look like a school of spearing swimming down there on the bottom. Now to enhance this bait, I like to put pieces of squid on it too. But the top piece of squid would be too long. That would interfere with the bottom hook. We can't do that. So we have to measure it up alongside these little fish and cut it right there. Just straight across. And once again, we hook it through the widest end, like that. It doesn't interfere with the bottom hook. And as you can see, there's a school of fish going by there. The squid makes the more fluoration in the water. It looks really great. And on the bottom hook, we could make the squid long. There's nothing to interfere with in the back of it. And that's a real nice bait, and it's full of many big doormats for me. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine got a world record a couple of weeks ago, baited like that. Got a 15-pound fluke on 16-pound trilene line. The record was 3.5 years old. He beat it by a pound, and he fooled the fish with this. Okay, now the next bait for doormats would be a whole squid, a finger squid. Now, how to bait this squid is almost the same way as the fluke belly. You have to lay the hooks alongside. First, we'll put the bottom or stinger hook right through the eye of the squid, in through one side and out the other. Then we put the bottom hook right in the tip of the tail. Now, that's a very natural looking bait. It's probably the best bait you could use, but porgies, sea bass, everything loves squid. And you'll be fishing down there and something will tear the head off and you might not even realize it, and you'll be fishing down there with a bait that's not effective enough to catch big fluke. So this is great when there's no other fish around. You'll probably catch really big doormats with a whole squid like that. It's happened quite a few times, but like I said before, everything loves squid, and fish with that. And then when you catch a fluke, by all means use a fluke. It's much tougher for the fish to get off, and even if the little fish do bite it, they can't do any damage to it. Now we have to go over this once again. This was our starter bait. Okay, we fish with that until we catch this. Then we fillet that up in quarters like I showed you to get strips like this. And the bait will look like this. We'll split the tail, and it'll be a real nice looking bait. And like I said before, the dark side catches a lot of big fish. When you catch whole squid in the water, they're almost the same color as that skin on a fluke. So I imagine that's why it appeals to the bigger fish. Now we got the school of fish with the squids and the split tails, which my friend caught the world record on a couple of weeks ago. And this is the whole squid. See how nice that is? Now, this has to be a little taut at all times. I mean, a little bit of slack in there. If it's too taut, it'll be the wrong way. And I'll show you what I mean. See? It'll pull the head up and bend the squid in. And that's no good. It's too taut. You gotta always have a little bit of slack in here. Just like with this. You see there's a little bit of slack in between the two hooks? That's very important. Now that we get the tackle straightened out, we have to know where to go to find the fish. So like I mentioned before, the rips, one of my favorite places. 90% of the time I fish the rips. Even if it's not a major rip. Sometimes I'll have rips off by Gardener's Island or somewhere. You always catch big fish. But here's how we find the rip. The water is smooth, and then it starts crusting. Then it gets smooth again. This would be the rip, all white water here. And what causes that rip, we'll take some simple rips like the Midway rips and by Great Eastern and the Pollock rip in Montauk. They have reef-like edges on the bottom, like this. It would read on your graph. And the tide runs so strong against this, where it's cross tide. This is the ocean meeting the sound, where this tide is just about changing and this tide is running hard. It meets so hard against this that it causes turbulence all around here. You got like 60 foot of water all of a sudden rushing up into 20 foot and coming over that top. And now this is where all the bait fish get caught, in the turbulence. They all get caught in here, the bait fish, because they swim against the current, and if they're swimming this way, they get up to here, and this rip is so hard and the turbulence is so great, they just get caught and spin around, and the fluke lay, nice sized fluke. I've caught fluke up to 7, 8 pounds in a rip. And a friend of mine got a 17-pounder there. But for now, we're fishing for medium-sized fish. The trophy fish comes, like if you started here at the top of the tide, you'd have to fish 4 hours. You got about a half-hour slack. And then you have to fish 4 hours while the tide is running strong. Only to here and to here. Because you'll go up here and you throw a marker buoy right where you hit the fish. But you're not going to hit the fish here. You start up here because if you're fishing with big baits especially, you have to let your line down slow. Otherwise, the line will come up and twist around your main line and you'll never get a fish. So you start to drift here and start letting your line out slow. By the time you get with this fast current, by the time your line gets to the bottom, you'll be right here where the fish are feeding. And then by the time you get here, you throw the second buoy out, because when you drift back here, even though there's really big fish back here, there's really big fluke laying back here, but you won't catch them then. Because in all of that 4 hours of that really roaring tide, the bait fish are all here. The 4, 5, and 6 pound fish are chewing them up to all the bait fish. The bits and pieces and halves of them are coming back with the current, And the big fish just lay there and eat all they want for them. While little fish, they won't get mixed up in this frenzied feeding. They're too smart and too lazy. And then, after you got your marker buoy down, you start to drift here, you stop here, lines up right away, you come back to the first buoy, because in that tide, if you go 10 feet past here, or 10 feet past there on each drift, you'll miss like 2.5 hours of fishing time in the course of the 4 hours. Now, after the 4 hours, the white water disappears. The rip is stopping now because the tide's really slowed down immensely. Forget it. There's no more turbulence here. The fish could swim. The little bait fish could swim. The fluke that are here feeding, there's nothing really for them to get excited about anymore. All the bait fish have stopped being twisted and turned in this turbulence where they can catch them easy. And the fishing gets really slow there. But then back here, you use big baits now. Fluke belly baits, like with a split tail, that would be your hook. And snappers, live snappers or live mackerel. You drift here now, you drift back here, because the big fish is still there. They never get mixed up in this. And for 1 hour, you got a chance to get in a trophy fish that you can put on a wall. And that's where they are. You only got an hour to catch them, though. And I think that's about completes about the rips, the principle of it. And you catch fish on every rip. I fished in rips in Robert Moses. I'd never been there in my life. And I caught nice fluke in a lot of them. Once you fish one rip, anywhere you go, you can fish the rip the same way, any rip you come to. Okay. That's it for the rips. Now, this seminar is about catching big fish, so when we catch big fish, we lose a lot of tackle because they hang out in the rocks, rocky bottoms. They hang out in the rocks and they bury themselves in the gravel. There's usually a lot of gravel and kelp around rocks, and all you see, if you're down swimming under the water, is a couple of eyes and the outline of the fin. You don't see anything else. The fish is buried underneath there. He's laying in the rocks. The bait fish come up, swimming against the current, over the rocks. This guy got no disturbance at all on him. The water flow is coming over the top of his head. His eyes are looking out. He sees the bait fish come over, even if there's 5 of them. One flick of his tail, and he's got him. So when you fish in the rocks, to avoid losing a lot of tackle, that's the main problem. You have to jig it almost like a flounder when you're flounder fishing. And when you feel it coming up, you can feel it. You got to reel up a little slack. Then you lift high till you come down again. Then you jig it till you come over here. And that's where the fish are. The big fish stay in the rocks. Ledges, reefs, wrecks, and rips. We're at the edge of the rip. Just about. The edge is in there. You can see it plain, even though it's subsiding a lot. We got about an hour left of the tide, and this is prime time in the tide anyway to catch big fish. So what we do is throw a marker buoy in there. We got 10 feet extra line on there. It'll hit the bottom, and then there's 10 extra feet. So for the pull of the tide, the marker won't go on the bottom, and you should always paint them black or yellow. You notice how it stands out? A white one, especially when the rip is working good and the white water's there, is very hard to find. Okay, now we're going to fish and drift along our marker and hit the edge of the rip. To the other edge of it, there's 2 edges now. And when the bites stop, we'll throw the other marker in and we'll have a direct line on drifting from the start to the end without wasting any valuable fishing time. Okay, now we're coming to the end of the rip. You can see the edge here, plain as day, even though the tide subsided a lot, quite a bit. You can still see the edge of the rip really good. You don't have to look for the white water, you can still see the rip. So, we'll be out of this rip soon, and we're going to throw our other marker. Like I said before, we can't waste valuable time, and we could actually, there's another rip beyond this. We could actually drift into that, but we're going to work this rip. So we save precious fishing time in this hour. Okay, now I showed you how to make the buoys, very simple. Chlorox bottle, painted black or yellow so it stands out for you. Some sinkers attached to it, 10 feet of extra line. This is 50-pound monofilament. We used to do it with rope, but the rope has such resistance in the tide that it pulls the buoy down into the water a lot, even with the 10 feet extra slack. So, this will be the end of our drift. We'll throw the other buoy. And you can see the edge of the other rip starting there. So what we're going to do now is make another drift back between our buoys. That'll be your drift pattern. See the two buoys in line? And you won't waste any time. It's one at this edge of the rip and one at the end of the rip. And that's where the fish are feeding, so get to the last buoy, start fishing here. By the time you let your baits out slow the way I said, you'll be right at the edge of the rip with your baits. As you can see, you can judge it from the distance of the smooth water to the rip. And we got the straight line, right in line. We drip right through the rip to the other edge and catch the whole area where they're feeding. Now, of course, we don't want to clutter up this whole rip with buoys, so if you see someone fishing with buoy markers, just use the buddy system and fish right on his markers, or let him fish on your markers. Either way. Very important. That's where the fight comes in when you're fluke fishing, when you get the fish to the top of the water. So many people got small nets, so many people got white nets, so many people don't have any nets, which happened to me once. I know I'm talking from experience. It's not something I heard. I had a fluke on at Breezy Point in a rip a lot of years ago. And it looked like the size of a hood of a car to me, and I had no net, and I couldn't get him in a boat. And it was in June. I didn't expect a big fish. But anyway, netting a fish. A fluke, when you hook a fluke, it's like being stuck in the bottom, really a big fluke. And you're really not sure until you start getting them off the bottom and you feel them pumping. Then it gives you a nice fight. Like the big one ran back down to the bottom about 4 times with me. But when you get him up to the top and he sees the boat, and no matter how tired you think he is, if you hit him in the tail with your net, with your gaff, with anything, you can kiss him goodbye. They get so powerful and they're so strong that all the suction they use to stay on the bottom, they use to go back down there. And they usually break your line. 40 and 50-pound test line, too. So never do that. That's the first rule. Never net him from the tail. Never reach out with the net like that. So the rim of the net, even if you got a green mesh net, which you should have it, don't scare the fish. When they see the aluminum rim, they're going to go crazy and you're going to lose them. The right way to do it is make the angler turn the fish around and swim them into the net. That's the only way, the right way to net a fluke. Here's a prime example of how trophy fish are lost at the boat. Tail face with the net. Goodbye, trophy fish. As you can see, the 10-pound fluke is gone, but the 2-ounce sinker is still there. Is the same person going to net a fish tail faced again? Look at this. 2 trophy fish gone, back to the bottom. I bet you he never does that again. This is reaching out too far. With the rim of the net at the eye level of the fish, watch this. Forget it. Another trophy fish gone. Now you'll see the proper way to net the fish. The net, you'll notice, is way down below the eye level of the fish. Swim the fish into the net, swoop him up, and he's in the boat. Here's another way, the proper way. Notice the net going down deep under the eye level of the fish. There we go, in the boat.